Vivid Memories. This is a competitive game in which we collect fragments of memories, we process them, and we try to turn them into cherished moments that ultimately will score us a lot of points. So the theme supports some really impressive art. I love the art, and actually, I'll be honest, that's one of the reasons why I became curious about the game in the first place. I saw some images of the art, and it was just so incredible. So just so that you know, these are the moments that we are trying to build up, to collect, and we use these really cool hard plastic fragments to do so. And look at this, these tiles are double-sided. On one side you see the memory, the thing that happened, and then later how it is remembered. And so you have all these kids that are thinking of these amazing adventures. This is just such good art. But of course, also museums have a lot of good art, so game art really makes sense only if it is also combined with great game mechanics. Mechanically, also, the game shares some ideas with Splendor, and that is very appealing to me, since Splendor is one of my favorite games ever. So, basically, the game is Splendor with more steps, which doesn't have to be a bad thing if the extra steps will give you more strategy, more things to do. Depending on the number of players, you will have a number of these cardboard tiles out from the stack that I showed you, and then a number of fragments that go on them. The first phase of each round, and there are 3 rounds, then at the end, play with the most points wins the game. The first phase in each round is the players will collect these tokens. And when it is your turn to collect, you could collect 1, 2, or 3, following some rules. You have to take them from one side of the line only. You can't just grab from the center. So this side, this end, or this end here going in. You can take just one fragment, and that's it, and you place it on your personal board. If you take only one fragment, you also get immediately an extra action that allows you to rearrange some of your tokens. Or you can take 2 fragments, in which case they must be the same. So I could take those 2, for example, or those 2 red from the other end of the line. Or you can take 3 fragments, in which case they have to be all different, like so. When you collect fragments, you have to place them all in the same hex, and it has to be an empty hex on your board. Again, just look at this board. It's really well produced with these things snugly fitting into the hexes. And then suppose it's my turn again, magically, and now I decide to take from this side, and let's take 2 of the same kind. When by taking a fragment you empty a tile, then you get to collect the tile itself, and you place it next to your board for now. And also then you can start taking from the next one. So that's why I was able to take 2 blue that way. And then my opponent collects those 3 now. They're all different, so they can, and they also get to collect this tile. So as the game progresses, but in this example, I magically ended up having them on my board instead. So as the game progresses, players will collect fragments that they place on the board. You can place the newly acquired fragments in any one empty hex, and players also will collect these tiles until, well, they're all gone. Everything has been assigned to players. Then we have a second phase of the round in which players can perform actions. In that phase, if you had acquired new cardboard tiles, you must place them in slots here on the top of your board, covering the icons that you see here. Suppose that I decide to do this, for example. And maybe I also had another tile, and I decide to place it here instead. After that, players can take 4 actions, and this can be done simultaneously because all actions happen on each player's board. There is no interaction there. And the actions are any combination of the actions that were printed on the board and are still visible, or actions printed on the tiles, and those are visible too. And so that you see what you got available there, discard 2 for another 1, gain 1, move 1, switch 2. And then we have these other actions, and again, taking the tiles is super important because it scores you points, but they have actions that are a little more finicky. Here, for example, replace a purple one with these two, or replace a yellow one with those other two. So as you perform those actions, these things may be moved around and shuffled and end up in different configurations. And so suppose that after I took all my actions, for example, I have that. Why not? I decided that that's gonna happen. Also, when you take an action on a tile, it is flipped to the other side, revealing a scoring icon. Now, by flipping it, see, I'm hiding both the action on the tile and the action printed on the board. So after I take an action on one of the tiles, I cannot take actions with it until I score it. By scoring it, I'll be able to remove it, making the slot available for actions again. And so after we have taken our actions is the scoring phase, in which players will get to score points based on the hexes on their board that match the corresponding icons. For example, for each hex in which I have exactly those three fragments there, I score 6 points, and lo and behold, I do have 1 there. And so by scoring it, even if it's just one location, I can remove it. This one, I don't think I can remove it right now, so that means that it just clogs a slot there, and that means next turn I will have only 3 actions during the action phase. So remember, you collect the tokens from the center, tokens and fragments, place the cardboard tokens, perform 4 actions, and then you score. Again, that's one way of scoring. Another way of scoring is by making lines of hexes that have the same kind of fragment, going from a slot on the side, on the edges, that has that icon to another one. So one way, for example, if I'm trying to score a line of lightning bolts, is to create a line from that slot there to this other one down here, to this other one down here. And suppose that that is what's happening. Now I have created a connection there. How many points that line scores me? The number of fragments in the line, you see this hex touches that one, so it's fine, it's part of the same network. The number of hexes in the connected line times the number of empty slots that I'm connecting to. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm connecting 2 empty lightning bolt spots. That should be 10. Yes. Also, then I take a fragment from the edge of the line and I fill that up. So remember, they cannot score it because it's the number of fragments in the line is times the number of empty slots it connects to. However, if by connecting, I am able to fill up all of the slots in a single area, then I get to collect also that number of points at the end of the game, which is pretty sweet. Moreover, the tiles that I collected, remember, and once I scored them, I remove them from there, but I keep them because each player receives an aspiration at the beginning of the game. It is a random tile placed there, kept secret. And basically, it will score extra points for fragments on your board, fragments on the edges, and the tiles that you collected that have that kind of fragment there. You play for 3 rounds, again, collect tokens and fragments, perform up to 4 actions, score tiles and score connections. Do that 3 times, perform final scoring. The end of the game, play with the most points, wins the game. I had pretty high expectations for Vivid Memories because the art looks so good and it's based on a drafting mechanic that I like very much. Again, if extra steps mean extra strategy, I'm all for it. But this is not Advanced Splendor. I played it with 2 people only, and I'll explain also why I'm okay with that. I don't feel any desire to play with more. But with 2 people, the game can be pretty tug-of-war-ish. It can be pretty mean because if by taking something that gives me an advantage, I can also leave something behind that is not very good, that will force you then to give me a tile, to leave a tile there that I can take. I'm gonna do it. There's no incentive not to set up your situation while also trying to damage the opponent. With more players, I see how that maybe wouldn't be a factor, because if the player before me is ahead of me and the player after me is behind, I have no interest in hurting that player. I'm just gonna do my best. But again, with two players, it feels pretty claustrophobic, and you can actively deny a lot of resources. It almost feels like in each round, the opening moves in a two-player game are going to be some of the most important ones, because I can set up a situation where it's almost impossible for you to get any of those tiles, which will damage you in scoring, well, a lot. And with two players, the game almost already had too much downtime. There were already times where I was watching my opponent stare at the table, at the components on the table, deciding what to take and in what order and from which side. And then when it came my turn, and that's when I started really building my strategy, because the situation changes right before you take your turn. You cannot plan your turn ahead. And then I started to think about my strategy, and I started feeling guilty, and I started feeling, I don't know, I can spend more time in, forcing this downtime on my opponent, or take a subpar move, which is just unpleasant. And, if a two players, it almost has too much downtime, then that's why I have no interest in playing it with 3 or 4 players, because there's nothing for you to do outside of turn. There is no way for you to plan your turn ahead. Now I'm just playing 33% or 25% of that phase of the drafting thing. Of course, then everybody scores at the same time, but still, that part can take too long. So I had a problem there, because at 2 it feels a little too confrontational and cold and abstract, and almost you have too much control again on, if you see a certain pattern, too much control on your chances of blocking the opponent from getting a lot of tiles. And I don't like downtime, and I feel that at 3 or 4 there would be way too much of that. Then it comes to the puzzle, and that's another problem. The puzzle, I don't know how to phrase it other than it doesn't feel all that interesting. Moving things around, trying to, there's a tile that wants these 3 pieces, and I'm going to figure out how to put those 3 pieces there. Then after I scored that, I'll try to move them and form a chain. Somehow the puzzle felt fiddly, felt a lot of work for not a lot of gain. And by the way, however, since the economy is so tight, in order to score, I do need to have a lot of things that line up in the correct way. Again, that is what will cause necessarily downtime, because you can't say, oh, well, I'll go and see what happens next. Between resources being so limited, so few turns, the economy's tight, in another problem, another thing that makes the experience less interesting is that, again, making a mistake may have or couple of mistakes may have a pretty significant impact on the overall experience. The art is amazing. The art looks so good, but then you also notice that there are repeats, which is not ideal. Some colors printed on the icons on the tiles are just too close to each other, blue and purple. They're very easy to mistake for one another. And that's just not okay. That's just not okay. That's something in the production process. Somebody didn't notice that was going to impact gameplay. It's entirely possible to collect the wrong kind of fragment because those 2 icons are so close. But then you're really staring at it and double checking and triple checking. And again, that's not fun. That should not be where your attention is. So Vivid Memories, alas, turned out to be a disappointment. The art looks amazing, and the general idea, children doing one thing and remembering, a lot more epic than it was. It's a great idea. The implementation from the point of view of production is not perfect, let's put it that way. And gameplay. Unfortunately, gameplay is just not particularly engaging with all of the factors that I described.